Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something truly mind-blowing?
I know, I am.
We're talking neurotechnology today.
A field that's poised to revolutionize, well, just about everything.
Yeah, think about it. Treating diseases, enhancing our abilities. It's like science fiction becoming reality, right?
Absolutely.
And at the forefront of all this is Neuralink, Elon Musk's company. They're making headlines with their brain-computer interfaces. You've probably heard about it, right?
Oh, for sure.
Big news, they just got FDA approval for human trials. That's huge.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It really is. What Neuralink is developing, it's essentially a tiny computer, like think coin-sized implanted in the skull.
Wow.
And get this, it has these super thin, hair-thin electrodes that can pick up brain signals.
Just the precision of that is incredible.
And potentially, the idea is that down the line, they could even send signals back to the brain.
Whoa!
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff.
And they've even developed a robotic system for the implant procedure.
Right, robotic surgery, yeah.
To minimize any damage to brain tissue.
To be as precise as possible.
Super precise. And it seems to be working. They've had some pretty remarkable results already.
Well, they've got the monkey playing Pong, right?
Oh, yeah, that's the one. That's what caught everyone's attention. The monkey controlling the game just by thinking about it.
Exactly.
But Neuralink's not the only player in the game, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah.
There are other companies out there like Synchron. They're taking different approaches.
How so?
Well, for one, they're inserting the implants through blood vessels.
Instead of going through the skull.
Exactly.
Interesting. So whether it's Neuralink's approach or Synchron's, they're both tapping into the same underlying principle.
Right, they're both focusing on the electrical signals that neurons in our brains use to communicate.
So these implants are essentially listening in on that conversation, basically, and translating it into digital data.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So let's talk about how this technology is actually being used. The near future applications, especially in healthcare, are super exciting, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We're talking about restoring mobility for people who are paralyzed.
Wow.
Treating conditions like Parkinson's. The potential here is just life-changing for so many people.
Absolutely. And one of the sources we looked at featured a study about a patient with ALS.
Oh, right, the one who was able to type.
Yeah, using a brain implant. And they achieved like 95% accuracy. Just think about the possibilities for those who have lost the ability to communicate.
It's amazing.
It really is. But it also raises a lot of questions, like how do these implants actually work? What kinds of brain signals are they picking up on?
Yeah, how do they decode those signals?
Right, and turn them into something meaningful like movement on a screen, for example.
Well, Neuralink, for instance, they're focusing on a part of the brain called the motor cortex.
The motor cortex.
Yeah, which is responsible for controlling movement. And the electrodes pick up on the electrical activity of the neurons firing in that region.
Okay.
You see? Each neuron firing is like a tiny little electrical pulse. And when you move your arm, let's say a whole bunch of neurons in your motor cortex,
right,
they fire in a specific pattern.
Okay.
The implant's electrodes, they detect those patterns, and the chip processes that data, turns it into a command that a computer can understand.
So in the case of that monkey playing Pong, the implant was basically translating the monkey's thoughts about moving the paddle into actual movement on the screen.
Exactly. And the more the monkey practiced, the better the implant became at decoding those thought patterns.
Interesting.
It's kind of like learning a new language. The implant is constantly refining its ability to understand the brain's signals.
Okay, so I'm starting to get the picture.
Yeah.
So what about other types of brain signals? Can these implants pick up on things like emotions or memories, that kind of thing?
Well, that's where things get even more complex.
I bet.
We're still a long way from being able to decode those kinds of complex brain states.
Yeah.
The brain is incredibly intricate with billions of neurons, all interconnected in ways we're only beginning to understand.
I think one of the sources we looked at compared understanding the brain to mapping the entire universe.
It's a good analogy.
It's just mind-bogglingly complex.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's why, even with all the advancements we've made, we're still in the early stages of neurotechnology. But what we're learning now is laying the groundwork for some truly incredible possibilities down the road.
Like downloading knowledge directly into the brain, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it?
But if these implants can already translate thoughts into actions, couldn't they theoretically translate information directly into our brains?
Well, it's a fascinating concept and one that researchers are actively exploring.
Yeah.
But it's important to break it down a bit.
Right.
Learning and memory, Yeah. They're not as simple as just transferring data, right? They involve complex processes of encoding, storing, and retrieving information. Our brains, they create connections between neurons, strengthening those connections as we learn over time.
So it's not like copying a file from one computer to another. It's more about guiding the brain to create its own understanding.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Instead of giving someone a detailed map of a city, you'd be giving them the tools and guidance to explore and build their own mental map.
I see.
It's about facilitating learning, not replacing it.
That makes a lot more sense. And it's probably a good thing, right? I mean, part of the joy of learning is the journey, the struggle, the gradual aha moments along the way.
That's a great point. And it raises some interesting philosophical questions, too.
Well, like what?
Well, what happens to the human experience of learning if we can bypass those processes? Does knowledge have the same value if it's acquired instantaneously?
Right.
Do we lose something essential about what it means to be human?
It's like the difference between reading a classic novel and just getting the SparkNotes summary, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
You get the plot points.
Right.
But you miss all the nuance, the emotional depth, the beauty of the language.
Precisely. And there's a potential danger in assuming that just having access to information equals true understanding, right? Knowledge without wisdom can be a dangerous thing.
That's a good point. It makes you wonder if, alongside all these technological advancements, we need to develop a whole new framework for learning and understanding in this new world of brain-computer interfaces.
Perhaps. Or perhaps the human brain will adapt and find new ways to integrate these technologies while still preserving the essence of what makes us uniquely human.
Well, that's something to think about, for sure. And on that note of existential pondering, I think we've given our listener plenty to chew on today. It's been a fascinating deep dive into this rapidly evolving field, and we've only just scratched the surface, really.
We have. We've only just begun. There are so many exciting avenues to explore.
Right.
From potential applications in education and entertainment to the far-reaching implications for human evolution.
It's incredible.
It is. But before we get too carried away with all the possibilities, I think we need to address the elephant in the room.
You're talking about the ethical considerations, right?
Exactly.
This is powerful technology, no doubt.
It is.
With the potential for incredible good.
For sure.
But also potential harm.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And with any powerful technology, there are risks that need to be carefully considered.
Right.
One of the biggest concerns, of course, is data privacy.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, we're talking about the most personal and sensitive information imaginable here.
Our thoughts, feelings, memories.
Exactly. It's a bit unnerving to think that someone could potentially access that kind of information, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That's why it's so crucial to have those ethical guidelines and regulations in place.
Absolutely.
To protect against misuse.
We need to make sure it's being used responsibly.
And those conversations are already happening, right?
They are, thankfully. Scientists, ethicists, and policymakers.
Okay.
They're working to develop frameworks that prioritize safety, privacy, and individual rights.
It seems like everyone is aware of the potential downsides, which is good. But how do we even begin to regulate something as complex as neurotechnology? It's not like we can just put a lock on our thoughts.
It's definitely a challenge. One approach that's being discussed is this idea of neurorights.
Neurorights?
Yeah, essentially fundamental human rights.
Okay.
That specifically address the ethical implications of neurotechnology.
So things like the right to cognitive liberty.
Exactly.
The right to mental privacy. The right to protect our own neural data.
Precisely. It's about ensuring that individuals have control over their own minds and their neural data is protected from unauthorized access or manipulation.
That makes sense, but it also feels like we're entering uncharted territory here.
In a way, we are.
We're essentially trying to define ethical boundaries for a technology that's still in its infancy.
It's true. And that's precisely why these conversations are so important. As neurotechnology continues to advance, we need to be having these discussions now to ensure that it's developed and used responsibly. It's about striking that balance between innovation and safeguarding human dignity.
Absolutely. It's a lot to process, isn't it? We've covered so much ground today. From the inner workings of Neuralink, to the philosophical implications of downloading knowledge, to the ethical considerations of mind-reading technology, it's a lot.
And I've only just scratched the surface.
It's mind-blowing.
But hopefully this has given you a better understanding of the incredible potential.
For sure.
And the complex challenges of neurotechnology.
Absolutely. So before we wrap things up, I want to turn it back over to you, the listener. Imagine a world where brain-computer interfaces are commonplace. How do you think this technology will impact your life? What excites you about the possibilities? And what concerns you?
It's a question worth pondering, because the future of neurotechnology is, in many ways, up to us to shape.
We've talked about the potential for medical breakthroughs, cognitive enhancements,
Right.
even the possibility of uploading our consciousness. But what about the everyday implications? You know, the things that affect our daily lives.
Think about how we communicate, learn, work, even just experience the world around us. Neurotechnology has the potential to change all of that in profound ways.
I mean, will we still need keyboards and smartphones if we can communicate directly with our thoughts?
Good question.
Will education be revolutionized if we can learn new skills in an instant? Will virtual reality become indistinguishable from reality itself? I mean, it's a lot to think about.
It is. It's a future filled with incredible promise and potential peril.
Yeah.
And it's a future that we'll need to navigate with wisdom, foresight, and a deep understanding of what it means to be human.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. It really makes you wonder what the future holds.
It does, doesn't it?
I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners today, though. This isn't just about some cool new gadgets or anything. This is about a fundamental shift in what's possible for humanity, you know?
It really is.
And it's a conversation we all need to be a part of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to engage in thoughtful dialogue.
Yeah.
Consider the ethical implications.
For sure.
And work together to ensure that neurotechnology is used for good.
So to our listener out there, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Are you excited about the possibilities? Concerned about the risks? I mean, what kind of future do you envision for neurotechnology?
Whatever your perspective,
Yeah.
keep exploring.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions.
Keep learning.
And keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
Because the future of neurotechnology is ultimately in our hands.
Well said. That's it for our deep dive into Neuralink and the future of neurotechnology. We hope you found it as fascinating and thought-provoking as we did.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those synapses firing.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.